So we're finding restrictions on a radicand. Remember, the only thing that can go wrong with a square root function is if there's a negative inside it. If the thing inside the root is 0, we can do the square root then. Or if it's any positive number, we can do the square root. So the way you find these restrictions is you take whatever's inside the radical, in this case 4x plus 1, and you say whatever that is has to be greater than 0 or at least equal to 0. That's our restriction. And now you just solve it for x. So take the 1 over to the right-hand side, divide everything by 4. Okay, there's our restriction for this one. X has to be higher than or at least equal to negative 1/4. As long as that's true, then this radical will work, and then the rest of the equation should be fine. Here, the radicand is 2 minus 5x, and so we say the exact same thing. That has to be greater than or at least equal to 0. So take the 5x to the other side. 2 has to be greater than or equal to 5x. Divide by 5, and we get, we divide that side by 5, we divide this side by 5, so x has to be less than or equal to 2/5. C has 2 roots, which means we have to do this drill twice. First, x minus 2 has to be positive. Second, x minus 4 has to be positive, or at least 0. So here we get x is greater than or equal to 2. Here we get x is greater than or equal to 4. Now, when there's more than one inequality, we need to find the place where they both overlap. We need to satisfy both of them at once. Here we have one inequality, this one, saying that your number has to be 2 or higher. And then we have a second inequality, just changing colors, here, which says it has to be 4 or higher. Where do those overlap? Well, certainly not here. Neither of them is satisfied here. They aren't both satisfied here. If you're in the 2 to 4 range, then that means this root is working, this second root is not. So the only place they're both working is from 4 on up. So overall, the restriction for these is going to be x is greater than or equal to 4. The number line is generally the best way to solve these. Draw both inequalities and then find the place where both of them are on or satisfied at the same time. It turns out this restriction is kind of pointless. This is like saying for your kid to go into the pool, they have to be over 4 years old. Oh, and they also have to be over 2 years old. Well, if they qualify for this one, then they automatically qualify for this one as well. So you can just throw out the easier qualification and go with the more important one. If you're over 4, then you're definitely over 2 as well. So just saying this is enough. Here's another one with 2 radicals. So the x plus 2 has to be greater than or equal to 0, which gives us, subtract 2 from each side, and we get this. And second, 3 minus x has to be greater than or equal to 0. Take the x to the right, and you get 3 must be greater than or equal. Sorry. Wasn't thinking the right way there. The 3 stays put, and the x goes over to the right-hand side. There we go. So now again, we need to find where both of these are true at the same time. Here's negative 2. This says x has to be greater than or equal to negative 2. So that could be anything up here. The second requirement here says x has to be less than or equal to 3. So starting at 3, but now going down. So where are both of those satisfied? No, 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 yes. Starting at negative 2, we have both of these things true at the same time. Yes, 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 yes. 3 is the very last spot where they're both satisfied. So everything between 0 and 3 is satisfactory. If you're below negative 2, that's too low for this requirement. If you're above 3, then that's too high for this requirement. So overall, our restriction is x has to be greater than or equal to -2, and at the same time it has to be less than or equal to 3. In other words, it has to be somewhere between those two values. And the last one, 2x minus 7 has to be greater than or equal to 0 for our square root to work, which means 2x is greater than or equal to 7, which means x is greater than or equal to 3.5. You could, of course, do this in fraction form, but the decimals are slightly easier, I find. And from the second root, 24 minus 5x has to be greater than or equal to 0. Take 5x to the other side, divide by 5, and you get 4.8 greater than or equal to x. So x has to be higher than 3.5, according to restriction number 1, 3.5 and up, but this says x has to be lower than or at most equal to 4.8. So again, where do we have them both covered? Not here, not here, not here, not here. Everywhere from 3.5 up to 4.8 is going to be our restriction. So 3.5 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 4.8. These two-part restrictions give people some trouble when just reading them, but the idea is, look at it one piece at a time. This first piece says x has to be higher than 3.5. The right-hand piece says x also has to be less than or equal to 4.8. So overall, I find the simplest way to read this is just the way it looks. X has to be somewhere between 3.5 and 4.8.